Okay, let's look at Vlookup today. Vlookup is a really powerful Google Sheets formula for looking up data from one source to another. So it lets you ask Google Sheets, find me the first row in a range of data that matches one criterion and return to me the contents of a certain cell in that row. It will return only the first time it finds that data in the lookup table. So you do want to make sure there's only one row of each kind in the table. It's okay if you have more than one, but it's going to return only the first one. So if they're always the same, it's fine. But for the most part, if you're looking up data to a lookup table, each row should be unique, because that's the whole point of the lookup function. So VLOOKUP is one criterion to look up based on, one cell as a result, and it compares to filter, where filter can be multiple criteria and multiple results and returns a list or an array of data. So we'll get into that also in a future course. So here's an example. In this case, we have a list of categories, and in each case, we want the type of the beer. So what we're doing is we're going through each one of these rows, and each time we're saying, hey, Google Sheets, find me this category in a lookup table, which happens to be this lookup table right here, and return to me the type. So in formula language, here's the Vlookup function, and as with all the functions, if you start typing them, Google will talk all about it, tell you how it works, give you hints as you go. Very helpful. So in this case, it's lookup cell A7, so it's A7. As you go down, you'll see it counts, because in each row we want to look up whatever's in this column, not that. So each row, that changes. So for the 7th row, look up cell A7. In the lookup range, which is the lookup sheet, cell A2 would be 1000, so right here. That range can be anything, can be anywhere, can be more columns, could be 1,000 columns or 10 columns. And then we're saying return the second column result. So we're saying find this, which is in the first column, and then return the type, which happens to be the second column. You could actually have it be the first column too. And you'll see it'll just return the same thing, because then the lookup column is always the first column. So it's not surprising, it just returns the same thing. In this case, we want the second column, so we're returning the second column. And then we're saying false, which means return an exact match of the category to the lookup table. As you go down, you'll see the lookup source changes, but the lookup table doesn't. So no matter what row we're in, it's always the same lookup table. That's why the dollar signs are there. We talked about relative and absolute references. And it works pretty well. So you'll find that once you know how to do this formula, you're using it a lot, because very often you have one place where you want to put data and another place where you have the source of data. And we talked about with data basics around, you want one source of truth for data. So you don't want the type to be here if you don't want this to be hand typed. Right now these are formulas because the source of the data is this lookup table. So if this lookup table is accurate, every time you have a category, you should look up to the type. Otherwise, if a type changes, and in this case it's unlikely, but there are a lot of cases where data will change. But if a type changes, all you have to do is change it here, and it will change everywhere else that it's looking up that piece of data. So it's a really powerful way to put data in once, have one source of truth for the data, and then look up to that data. So that's, again, a really good reason why you use this. As I said, once you start learning these functions and formulas, you'll use them all the time. But that's why we do that here. We could certainly just copy and paste. We could even copy and paste the values here. If I do Command-C, Command-Shift-V, now these are not formulas, they're values. But I really don't want to do that, because then this wouldn't be dynamic, and if I changed one of these types here, it would not change here. Right now, if I do go to regional dialect, and I change this to hamburger, the lookup will change, because it's dynamic. As you see, it changed all of those rows. I'm going to Command-Z to undo that. So that's how lookup works. Looks up data in a lookup table to match a category or another source of data that you want to match it to. So really powerful tool, and I'm sure you'll find it really useful in your work.